Yeah, there it is.
And we're live.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I want to thank you for joining us back to part two of this virtual pubcast.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about The Big Sick because I saw it.
And
Good.
I saw it as well.
I have not seen it.
Several weeks ago. Yeah.
So The Big Sick is the latest in what seems to be at least twice, 2 or 3 times a year for the last probably 5 years. Different comedians put out semi-autobiographical films about themselves, and that's okay. That many of them are very good films, actually. Of course, you have I would say the best of them up till now was Sleepwalk with Me. Really good movie that Mike Birbiglia put together. But The Big Sick, it kind of took it took the reins, and it has something really fascinating to tell. It's more than just a story of a comedian on the rise, so much as just almost almost too good to be true, just fascinating story of overcoming some very disturbing and scary odds. And not just that, but it's also a story of a relationship that might have gotten off to one of the most awkward starts humanly possible. Now, Hawk, you haven't seen this film yet, correct?
No.
All right. Are you familiar with the comedian Camille Nanjiani and his wife Emily Gordon?
Yeah, I like him a lot.
Okay. Yeah, the two of them have appeared on numerous podcasts together as a couple, and you get a sense of their interplay they have with each other. And that's the first thing I noticed because they co-wrote this movie with each other, and it immediately the dialogue uh, that occurs in this film feels like that same kind of genuine interplay. Now, for some reason, I'm not sure why they renamed her character in this movie to Emily Gardner. Maybe that was just to put um, a little bit of dramatic license into the film so they didn't have to tell it 100% based on the exact facts of their uh, relationship.
Okay.
I'm not sure. But essentially, the story is about Kumail is a Pakistani American stand up comedian in Chicago, the Chicago area, who is kind of, he's on the cusp of his, of moving forward in the comedian's world. And moving forward means getting picked to go to a comedy festival. And he's really trying hard to get picked for specifically the Montreal Festival, which is a pretty major comedy fest. Uh, and when going through this situation, and also to pay the bills, he also drives an Uber. He meets up with a girl named Emily, who is a non-Muslim woman, and he intentionally has to hide the fact that he's having this relationship hide it from his family because his family are they're very devout Muslim, and they want him to have a Pakistani wife, and specifically an arranged marriage. And so that's the first roadblock in this relationship. And Emily, she is sort of uh, an unusual bookish type herself with kind of a awkward sense of humor, and the two hit it off right away. But when this arranged marriage thing comes to the fore, they abruptly break the relationship gets broken up, only for the very next day Kumail wakes to a late night call from one of her friends telling him that he needs to go to the hospital like now because uh, she's been taken to the emergency room. And for lack of there being anyone else in her life that is immediately there, he is forced to basically stay with her as he finds out that she has gotten a pretty nasty infection that doctors are struggling to find out how to deal with. And what makes this an unusual relationship comedy is for probably a good 2/3 of this movie, the one of the romantic leads is in a friggin' coma. And instead, as a reflection, yeah, absolutely hilarious, right? Well, and so instead, he has, rather than communicating with her directly, he sort of has a almost to, correct me if you think this is wrong, Bill, but he has an almost a parallel, almost dating like relationship in a weird way with her parents when her parents come into town.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, like, he kind of learns about her or relearns about her through her parents, and at the same time learns a little about himself too, which sounds a little cliche, but that's what happens.
Well, a tragic situation like this forces some perspective into him that he didn't have before.
Yeah,
and that actually ended up being a good thing, allowing him to overcome some roadblocks in his life that he'd put in his way. And
yep.
This is, I think, one of my favorite movies of the year so far.
I still want to see it. It is playing near me. I just haven't had a chance to go out and catch it yet, but I fully intend to because I love the characters. I mean, I love the actors, and I like the concept, and the trailer is funny.
And the good news is it's playing in a good number of theaters because this has sort of become the indie darling of the summer. It was made for $5 million, and as of this weekend, it's going to cross the $50 million mark.
Nice.
So yeah, this is. I mean, it's not quite on the level of, say, earlier this year when we had the $5 million horror movie. Crap! I've been.
Get Out.
Yeah, Get Out. Jeez, the name was evading me, but it's not quite Get Out. But $50 million is a damn good profit to make off a $5 million investment.
Sure.
So. That is going to ensure that Emily Gordon and Kumail Nanjiani are in demand as script writers, should they choose to write something else. And Michael Showalter, who directed this, gives the movie, I think, a very good, solid atmosphere where he doesn't overplay the drama too much without having a good joke put in there here and there, and he also doesn't make the film too jokey, where it feels like it's doing a disservice to the reality of the situation. Any other thoughts on it, Bill?
I'm just kind of. I have nothing to offer on this film. I mean.
Yeah, me neither. I mean, I've already kind of talked about it. I was the only one, I think, to talk about it like several weeks ago.
Yeah.
And I think you summed it up quite well, really.
What you say entices me to see it, though. I still fully intend to go watch this because it looks like the fact that you liked it. And
a couple other things I will say. I do want to say a couple other things. This is specifically to the cast. I've already mentioned Kumail's great. Zoe Kazan as the stand-in for Emily is actually a really good performance. Holly Hunter and Ray Romano as Emily's mother and father. First of all, Holly Hunter is one of those actresses who hasn't done a whole lot lately. In fact, the last thing I remember her doing was the friggin' Incredibles.
She was in Batman versus Superman. She played the senator or congresswoman.
Oh, she did, didn't she?
That got blown up, yeah.
Still, I mean, she takes her roles very, she doesn't take a lot. And this was one of her best performances, though. I mean, even going back to her earlier roles, I mean, I really liked the layers. Ray Romano, too, actually. This is a movie that proves that there's more to Ray than just playing the schlub.
Which he does play here, but it's...
a kind of schlub, but he plays... in Everybody Loves Raymond, he was an excuse. He was the guy that everyone took a shit on. That's what he was. That's why I don't even like that. I never liked Everybody Loves Raymond, because the show was literally just an excuse to watch a character get shit on for a half hour. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't change. I forgot to do laundry today, and then everyone for the next half hour finds a way to yell at him for the fact that he forgot to do laundry.
Yeah. I mean,
this movie shows that he has some acting chops and such that maybe hasn't been touched on in the past.
He's a good actor, yeah.
And then also, I want to give some credit where credit's due. It's a small role, but David Alan Grier plays the coke-addled presenter at the comedy club.
Oh yeah, he does, doesn't he?
And it's actually a more subtle cocaine performance than you might expect, even though the first glimpse you get is of him leaving a bathroom while snorting. But he really hits the he hits the for those who've met someone who has those problems, he really hits on all you would expect to see from that kind of a personality. There were also some good performances from other comedians. Bo Burnham, Kurt Braunohler, Rebecca Naomi Jones. She's really not a comedian so much as she's more into musicals, but really all of them played some memorable side characters, and it makes you feel like you're in the comedy world when you see these characters. It feels lived in and real, and that's the important thing. Since there have been a lot of movies made by comedians about comedy lately, it's refreshing to see one where the scenes in the comedy world feel they don't feel like set dressing.
That's good.
So anyway, we'll go ahead and move on because you guys have something to rant about for a little while, and that you saw the Inhumans.
In glorious IMAX.
So tell me, was Inhumans inhuman to watch?
Yeah.
Inhumane, maybe.
Inhumane, yes.
All right.
most definitely.
Tell me all about it.
Okay, well, I was anticipating this, not in a good way, but when I first saw the teaser trailer, I knew this was going to be some mediocre, at best, shit. For those who don't know the Marvel Cinematic Universe, there's a show called Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. that I actually like. I haven't followed it like a hell of a lot recently, but I actually kind of enjoy it. And there was a subplot introduced in season 2 where, this crystal gets released in the atmosphere, and some people who are descendants of alien experiments on humans turn into Inhumans, which is basically the MCU's version of mutants. Except it's like alien weapons. That's like the backstory to it. The Kree race, who were shown in Guardians of the Galaxy, had the backstory was they went to Earth. They went to many planets, but they went to Earth to develop a race of beings that would have superpowers that they could use in a war. But they ended up abandoning the project or something, and now what we have left are descendants of these people. And so on Earth, there's already a group of them, and now there's also a secret group that we don't know about that lives on the moon in kind of a hidden fortress type thing, and they are the royal family of the Inhumans, led by Black Bolt and Medusa and a couple others, Karnak. They all have their own special powers, that kind of thing.
All the mutants that they didn't already sell to Fox, right?
Yes, these are they're not technically mutants. They're Inhumans. Yeah, I know. What's the difference?
They're mutants.
They're mutant. They're their version of mutants, basically. But
I've seen this, and your description still doesn't make any sense.
Me too. Yeah, I knew of the backstory a little bit, but that's all I knew about it. I know that Black Bolt is he can't speak without causing severe damage and or killing people, which we'll get into a very specific moment very shortly. But this was originally on the Marvel's Phase 3 slate as an actual film. But I assume during pre-production realized this would be a disaster of a movie. So they were like, let's just do a TV show if we have to.
And it's weird because I would like to know the actual reason why they took it off. And I could have sworn I read somewhere what that was, but I don't remember it. But then now they they filmed at least the first 2 episodes in IMAX with IMAX cameras, and released it in IMAX theaters for a fucking IMAX price.
Yes, this was a co-production with IMAX, actually. IMAX Entertainment, or some division of IMAX. Like, they actually put up, I don't know if they put up money, but they certainly are taking some profit from this. And the gimmick of IMAX is heavily attached to this movie. So you would think this pilot. So you would think with this 2-parter pilot shown in IMAX theaters that it would be visually impressive, and there would be a large amount of splendor to be had and amazement and all that. It is shot so fucking flatly and in environments that do not show off IMAX or the environments well at all. There's many shots of hallways, of small corridors and apartments.
Hallways and corridors, of course, being an earmark of the Netflix Marvel series.
Yes, but those are
different than that, though.
It's different than that, though. Those are impressive because of the choreography and the technique and the craft of capturing those sequences.
Not to mention in the hallway scenes in the Marvel shows, the geometry and the architecture of the hallways becomes sort of a piece of the fight.
Yes, they kind of are used as a weapon even.
Yeah.
At different points. This is just the setting. This is just where the people are walking through.
Cheap, bland set design.
Cheap, bland set design. Some of it looks kind of cool, but it's not cool enough. Like for example, there's some weird like curvy designs, like in the background, like lightning bolts and stuff like that. But it doesn't really amount to anything, and it's not particularly cleverly executed. It's just kind of like we said, bland. If it had been shot differently, perhaps it would be something a little more impressive. But no, this wasn't. This was actually a project. I don't know how many more episodes this guy did, but this particular set of episodes turned into a little IMAX movie. Was done by a filmmaker who's an alumnus of WWE Studios, who did the Condemned 2. He did the 12 Rounds 2.
12 Rounds 2, Reloaded.
The Marine 2, if I'm not mistaken. I think so.
Death Race 2.
Death Race 2, which I've heard.
He has a lot of 2s. Scorpion King 3.
Yes, he's not exactly a filmmaker with proper credits. He's got credits, but and there's nothing wrong with doing crappy direct-to-video sequels or anything like that. It's just
when you're not the guy that I would choose to do my, IMAX experience pilot episode Marvel series to tie into the movies.
This is supposed to launch a television show, and in a big way with IMAX cameras and stuff. That's the big selling point. And you get a guy whose only experience is shooting flatly.
It's almost kind of alarming the lack of quality control Marvel Studios has shown on this show, because they're incredibly selective. Disney is very selective about their directors. I was earlier today, I was reading this article for a brief detour. I was reading this article about the Star Wars films and how Colin Trevorrow, exited the film. Apparently, he got kind of full of himself when Jurassic World got really big, and then he's being such a shithead and full of himself that Kathleen Kennedy showed him the door. And somebody else was saying in an interview saying, yeah, I mean, there is one gatekeeper to the Star Wars universe, and that is Kathleen Kennedy. If you rub her the wrong way, if you rub her any way, you will get fired. So I know that Disney or Star Wars and Marvel are two separate branches of Disney, but even in Marvel, they're very careful about which directors they choose for the most part. So what the fuck happened with Inhumans? That they just grabbed this dude that's made a bunch of WWE films and actions direct-to-video sequels. In fact, I want to see if Roll Ryan, as his name is, has made any theatrical films whatsoever.
So now you're talking about how flatly the film was shot. It's worth noting that the cinematographer of this show, Jeff Jur, is actually a pretty reputable TV and occasional film cinematographer. He did episodes of Westworld, which is a damn good-looking series. He did episodes of Dexter, also good-looking, even if the show itself was iffy. And most notably to me, he was the director of photography for Carnival, which is, in my opinion, one of the most visually splendid TV series of the mid-2000s.
Well, I think in this case, there's two theories. One, the director actually was given some level of control here because Marvel just didn't give a fuck about the Inhumans. So maybe under his direction, this DP had no reason to care. Or they were given directive from the studio to make something as horrible as possible in a Mel Brooks, the producers kind of situation.
A third option is that in each of those situations, in these fantastic TV shows, great concept. This what's his name again?
The DP cinematographer, Jeff Jur.
Jeff Jur, he had a great showrunner and a great director guiding him, like giving him a good vision. Whereas Roll Ryan, he's like throne room with the like he doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. So a director who is lost is a cinematographer who is lost.
The showrunner of Inhumans is the guy who did Iron Fist.
Yeah.
So
Scott Buck, we talked about this. Scott Buck wrote a couple of your favorite episodes, Ken, of Rome. But of course, you can write one episode of a TV show, but that doesn't make you a de facto expert at running an entire TV show.
Right.
Well,
yes.
As far as a showrunner, you might say that his name is Scott Buck, and he's here to suck.
Scott Fuck.
Get it?
And he's
we get it. Buck suck. Yeah. Kill Bill. Right. I got it. That was good.
No, it wasn't. You can be
okay. All right. I won't give you pity then. But no.
I don't need your goddamn pity.
I saw this IMAX experience with my brother, who was so fucking bored that was the only amusement I had was watching his face go completely sullen and sad and angry at me for taking him to this.
And again, it has nothing to do with the fact that it's a TV series that's meant to be translated to IMAX, because there are plenty of examples of TV series going theatrical that, actually is a perfect example. I gave in a previous episode an example of the fact that I saw Game of Thrones in IMAX and it worked.
Yeah.
I saw, this isn't IMAX, but considering that this show was filmed in regular standard definition back in the 90s, I saw the double episode of Best of Both Worlds from Star Trek The Next Generation on a pretty big screen. It wasn't quite IMAX, but it was a big screen. And you know what? It looked pretty good.
One of the worst parts about Inhumans is that it's not even a shitty show blown up into a gigantic IMAX format, magnified, to epic proportions. It's just the IMAX format doesn't even really seem to fact. I didn't notice anything. It just looks like a shitty TV show on a big screen.
Yeah.
Right. That's what we're getting at, is that the IMAX, this technology that you've been given, this opportunity to use and exploit, they had some opportunity to make what was something crappy into something mediocre and maybe a little bit better than that.
That's not what I'm saying.
Just by visual at all, but instead they chose to shoot it like a normal or even a less than normal TV show. They shot it with like no effort.
Maybe they should have gone even more shitty and introduced the kind of problematic and shitty filming format that's even bigger than IMAX of Cinerama, in which you had three
cameras,
three 70 millimeter cameras that were synced with each other to create a intensely deep panoramic image.
I'm just saying that, I wish that the IMAX format would have magnified the poor production value of this show, but it just doesn't. It's just I just paid $16 or $14. I think my ticket was $14. To watch a TV show on a bigger screen.
Yeah.
That's just that's
like I would have preferred that. Like, wow, look at how bad IMAX makes this look, but instead it was just it just sucks.
Like, for example, Medusa's hair. Everyone was saying that fucking wig looks awful. And so we're thinking, okay, in IMAX, it's going to look 10 times worse. Yeah. And that's going to be funny. And then what's the first thing that happens when Medusa uses her powers? They cut her hair off.
Well, I thought it was interesting, by the way, and I thought that was funny, by the way. It was a total, crying Les Miserables, hair shaving scene.
Yes.
But
that was weird.
In this sequence where she uses her hair as a weapon, the camera, it's in this room where there's a bunch of pillars, and the camera's whipping around her with pillars occasionally obscuring her and everything. And I realized that is a really insulting way to cut costs on CGI.
Yeah, just throw shit in between the action and the camera.
Put stuff in the foreground so you don't have to use the effect.
Can I just make a comment that I'm looking at the cast of characters and the actors, and the two biggest leads on this show, their names, their actual actors' names, sound more superhero-ish than the superhero name.
What, Anson Mount?
Anson Mount and Serinda Swan. Those both sound like superhero names.
Anson Mount is a pretty awesome name.
It's a pretty awesome name. Not an awesome actor. Now, granted, he's not. He's trying. He's trying not to talk. I get that because that's his character. His character is someone who has the super voice power, which there is a brilliantly bad scene in this movie where it's a flashback. You see, to set things up a little bit, Black Bolt, he's basically the king of the Inhumans on the moon, and his queen is Medusa. And there's a scene where he needs time to think and contemplate a particular scenario that comes up involving his brother and involving the future of his race and everything. So he goes to his meditation room, and he's thinking really hard about past traumas. And one of them was when, I guess, his powers first came to be, which involves the death of his parents. He was directly responsible for the death of his parents because he spoke a word in front of them, and that power thrusted them away into a wall. Now, the way this scene is shot, this flashback is shot, is so fucking ridiculously funny that I mean, I was the only one. I wasn't the only one laughing in the theater. I mean, the theater wasn't even full. It wasn't even not full. It was just 2 or 3 of us in there. And we were all just cackling at it. We see a shot from the parents' perspective of a young Black Bolt, and he slowly opens his mouth and says, "Why?" and as he's saying it, his fucking air blasts of noise are popping out of his fucking mouth, and his parents blow back to the back wall as the camera is spinning around to Black Bolt's point of view, in which we see their corpses embedded inside this really tough brick.
They're just ashy splatters on the wall.
Yeah, right. And it's it's like Looney Tunes or something,
I think the best part of that scene was that
I was expecting to see the cutouts or something, it was ridiculous.
They distorted his voice too. It was why? It's just I laughed so hard I was choking.
Do you want to hear something really depressing, by the way? Anson Mount put a lot of work into his character. He apparently created a unique sign system. Since his character is not from Earth and would not know Earth-based sign language or sign systems, he actually he studied orchestra conductors and sign language systems to create an entirely unique version of sign language, making sure to study to make that there was no overlap with ASL. And he created a document with a language over 50 pages long to stay consistent. It says here, listen to this. Mount felt that if he could develop the language over several seasons,
this is going to last even one season.
It could become a constructed language equivalent to Klingon or Dothraki.
No.
Ken, do me a favor really quick. Look up, just Google Inhumans and look at a picture of Black Bolt's face.
Yeah.
When you see that is the face he holds for the entirety of the 90 minutes of this IMAX experience. His facial expression does not change a goddamn time.
He looks like he's going to fart the entire time. Yeah,
he looks like he's holding in a fart.
Like his lips are so pursed that it looks like he's going to fart. And it's so expressionless too. Like you'd think he'd be acting with his eyes and his cheeks a little bit,
his butt cheeks.
Yeah, literally every image I see of him is the exact same facial expression.
Yep, and it's the exact expression he holds for every second he's on screen in this show experience movie.
Piece of shit. Yeah.
By the way, I'm putting this as of right now. This is shortlisted on my worst of 2017 because you can be goddamn sure if Marvel wants to call this a movie, I'm gonna fucking treat it like one on my worst of list.
Are they calling it a movie or not?
No, not really.
They're calling it a feature, but they released it as a film. It's a 90-minute feature. There's not a definitive. There's credits beforehand. There's not a definitive break in between episodes 1 and 2, but you can kind of tell where it is because there's like a really dramatic music as the camera pans out and then a hard cut to two people walking down hallways. Like that felt like the beginning of the second episode, but then they're treating it as a feature. It has the $14 to $16 to $20 IMAX price tag. It's being treated as a feature film.
Yeah, it says here the series is going to run for 8 episodes, which automatically tells me that they're done with this.
Yeah, they just want to. They wasted too much time on it. Let's just put something out there and hope for the best.
It landed like a wet sack of cement.
Yes,
pretty much.
Another character, Black Bolt's brother Maximus. So he's one of the Moon Community Attilan or whatever it's called runs on a caste system.
The so-called Moon Unit.
Yeah, the Moon Unit. It runs on a caste system where everybody who has powers is part of the royal family. But if you don't have powers, you are a slave. And you work in a slum that kind of looks like bombed out Berlin. And the Black Bolt's brother, Maximus, is one of these people who has no powers. And
because he's his brother, he gets to live in the palace and stuff. He does.
But he is a voice of the people, he says. And one of the other things that I laughed the hardest at is during the fucking transmogrification scene where they get the crystal, the certain members of the Attilan, they go into these cheap-looking phone booth things, and then crystals are put into the phone booth, and the vapors give them their powers or unlock their powers. And in this one scene, the girl gets butterfly wings, and the guy gets nothing, and so he gets outcast. And Maximus is like, "Let's take time. Sometimes the process takes a while." And then some random guy in the audience is like, "It didn't with you."
Yes, I remember that. It was you.
What was that ceremony, anyways? I thought they were getting married or something, but
that was Pterogenesis. It was
Pterogenesis.
They just hit puberty, and this was their time to.
Are they siblings? Are they getting married? Like, what's going on?
I don't think so. I think they're just two young people.
I totally thought they were getting married. I actually
time for carousel.
Felix saw this. She contacted me and said, "Should I watch it?" I said, "No, don't do it." She's like, "I'm bored."
That was, of course, an immediate yes for her. You say no, you know.
Well, no, because then what I was trying to tell.
Let's not get into that.
No, shut up, Ken. I'm not talking about that.
No, what she said, or what I was trying to convey to her is that even on a Hawk Ripjaw level, this is not enjoyably bad.
Yeah, it's just bad. Yeah,
she went and saw it anyways, but
okay,
and had much the same reactions as we did. But
there is so much goddamn exposition in this.
it's so yeah. During the Teragenesis scene, one of them was like, "Oh, Teragenesis is a very archaic method of receiving one's powers through the ancient order of our system," and it's like, wow, you just laid out the entire thing for me in 2 lines.
Right, like there's no reason for you to do this because we already know the information.
Yeah.
Being that we're the characters in the show, Maximus is probably the most guilty of the exposition. He's constantly giving speeches and monologues, and there's this one scene where I imagined he goes up to Black Bolt. He's trying to take over. He's trying to create a military coup, and he goes up to Black Bolt after shaving off Medusa's hair, and he's like telling him his plan. And then at the end of his speech, he's like, "Are you going to kill me? Your only brother?" He says it like
he says it like that.
He says it like that with that kind of atmosphere to it. Like I think he said it more quietly than that, but he said it so theatrically that that's how I took it. And I just was like laughing inside my head, like, oh, God.
I laughed when he comes on to Medusa. He's like, "Hey, what the fuck?" And she is like, "I would never have you." And he's like, "Well, I can still think about it." And isn't it, the conversation was so awkwardly acted. Oh, and another thing, like, did you notice that the blocking of the scenes was very strange?
Yeah.
Like, you know, a well-blocked scene will have characters moving around the room in ways that make sense for the scene. But in this, characters just will move from one point to another for no reason other than to have a little bit of movement in the frame.
Right. There was another moment where Black Bolt lands on Earth because the royal family is being rushed to safety to Earth. Because of their dog Lockjaw. Their dog Lockjaw is an inhuman dog that can teleport to different places.
It's a giant bulldog.
He's inhuman. He's a dog.
It is. Right. Well, he is inhuman because he is a dog.
Yes, exactly. But he's a character from the comics, so I don't give a shit. You know.
Everybody loves him for some goddamn reason.
Yeah, I don't know. He's a completely CG character, by the way. So anyway, Black Bolt's on Earth. He's looking around modern day Honolulu, Hawaii, or whatever. Which that was the only credit I'll give this project. They actually chose a city that was different. They didn't pick like New York or Los Angeles. They picked Honolulu. And I thought, all right, that's different. You know, that's a different place.
So the producers wanted a vacation.
Yes, exactly. That's the bad side of it. So Black Bolt's walking around town, and he notices everyone's clothing, and then he notices his clothing, and he's like, I gotta fit in somehow. So he goes into like a fashion store, and of course we get a very short, not a montage, but like a very short, scene where he has to change.
It's one of those clothes, like trying on outfits montage where people give him like thumbs up or thumbs down.
Yeah, it's kind of like that, but
Sexy start playing.
No, but a similar song did play. I'm trying to remember what it was, but it wasn't.
I can't remember either.
It wasn't "I'm Too Sexy." It was. I want to say it was "Dude Looks Like a Lady," but it wasn't that.
So Inhumans is Marvel's new Mrs. Doubtfire.
Yeah, wouldn't that be funny? No, it wasn't that. But Black Bolt then rushes out of the place because he has no money. He just walks out, and then the police capture him, and they're like, "All right, buddy, you got to pay for that suit." And he's like, I can't because I can't speak and I have no money, you know? So he ends up in jail because of this. And that's the end of that.
That part really bugged me because, like, you know, and Felix actually helped iron this out for me. He's like, well, she said, well, he's a king. He doesn't pay for stuff. He's just taking. But the whole scene of Black Bolt on Hawaii, it is like, oh, because he can't talk, he's a fucking idiot. He just like walks out and he does like a 2-finger thank you.
Oh yeah, he does like a thank you, but I'm going. You know. That
it's like thanks. See, you wouldn't want to be ya. And then I actually, you know, you told me in the you told me this that the sound editing of the show hadn't gotten much better since the Comic-Con trailer, or it had gotten better. And I don't think that it did, because during the fight with the police, he uses
Oh yeah, there were some of that in that scene. Yeah,
stock punchy sound effects.
Yeah, there was some of that, but the sound editing, I guess maybe I meant the sound mixing. Like it sounded okay, you know.
It sounded okay. It's just you could tell when they were using stock effects.
Yeah, you could tell when they were using stock.
I was kind of bugged
me when they use those. Like I was watching a TV show today, and a character took his gun out, and they played that same generic gun remove holster sound effect. Sound.
It's like they took it off of a Sam Goody CD or something. Like it's just.
Yeah, you'd think by now sound mixers would know what sound effects have become cliched.
Yeah.
I mean, unless there's literally the director in that booth right there saying, "Yeah, put another Wilhelm in here." I guess Wilhelm gets a free pass because it's
so often used and it's just fun.
Yeah, I like it. Even in a serious film, I always find it amusing when they use it. It doesn't always take me out of the film either.
Yeah, Wilhelm I'll give a free pass to. But that said, it's there's certain sound effects that you hear everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was also startled in this how it takes maybe 10 seconds for Maximus to get the entire royal guard to turn against the royal family.
Right. There was no real turn. It's just the next scene.
He's like, "Hi, I'm here with the royal guard who are suddenly evil and we're going to kill you."
I liked it when they come up to Karnak. They're like, "Yeah, we're here to take over." And he's like, "You're here to take over on orders from King Maximus." And he's like, "Really?" He's like all sarcastic about it. He was the only good part of some of that show, like that character Karnak.
I cannot hear the name Karnak without thinking of Johnny Carson with the big turban.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
Karnak was fun, but his powers were increasingly poorly defined as the show went on.
Yes, and the way he kind of ended his little escapades at the very end of the presentation, it made him look like a doofus. He falls off a cliff, like, I gotta get to my king. And instead of using his powers to strategize, because his powers are like foresight or something.
Yeah, he has this kind of like clairvoyant mapping out of a situation to find the best route. And then they reveal this power maybe 10 minutes or less before he completely fails and falls off a cliff.
And then he hurts his head and he's like, "Ow, my head, I'm bleeding." And he gets lost in this like little Hawaiian forest. Yeah. And he's like, what the fuck do I do now? So
that's leave him, right?
That's pretty much how it ended for him. Yeah.
So much for a secret power of foresight.
Exactly. And then you have Gorgon, who has giant hooves. When he gets down to Hawaii, he spends probably 70% of his lines yelling the name of Triton, the guy who went missing at the beginning of the episode. And then he charges headfirst into the sea before realizing that giant hooves make it really hard to swim, so he almost drowns.
And on top of that, why would you yell into the ocean?
Why would he even be? Well, I guess he fell into the ocean, but still, I mean, it's
the guy fell into the ocean, but like the guy can't hear him because he's out in sea.
Yeah, he's underwater. You can't hear.
He's either underwater drowned or he's somewhere way far off. He's not going to be able to hear you. And this guy's like, "Triton!" And then he spends like the next 20 or so minutes hanging out with some surfers.
These Hawaiian surfer dudes have like a communal beach settlement.
Who totally accept him for who he is.
Which is cool.
They're like, "Oh, you got hooves? That's cool." They kind of already heard of Inhumans on Earth, so they figured this guy's one of them. And so they're like, whatever. But they also give bad exposition. They also give bad advice. And there's this bit where the Gorgon's like, I must go fight for my king. He's saying out loud to strangers he doesn't know, which is redundant. And the strangers, the Hawaiian surfer guys, are like, "Well, why don't you bring the fight to you?"
And he's like, "Gee, I never thought about that."
He's like, "Oh, I used to do that."
The other part that I laughed hard at was at the very beginning. This girl And this is the only cinematically interesting part in the entire 90-minute presentation is like slow motion shots of this girl running through a rainy forest in Honolulu as guys with guns chase her. And then Triton appears like, you're an Inhuman. Like there's a home for you up on the moon. I can protect you. And then 5 seconds later, it's like, blah, 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 and then she's dead. And then he falls into the water, also apparently dead. So like,
so that didn't work.
Yeah, like he gives her the speech about how he's going to protect her, and then she's fucking dead right away.
Well, not just that, but he gives her exposition as to who he is, where he's from, and what can be done to save her. It's as opposed to, are you okay? Don't worry, you have nothing to fear now. Come with me. Instead, he's like, I know of a place where you'll be like, who the fuck are you, dude? Don't
like, here you green-faced motherfucker. Don't try to tempt me. And
so
what was the other?
Go ahead.
There was Maximus's right-hand woman who has no character development. All she does is wear leather and kill people.
She's just an assassin, and she ends up getting killed. No one gives a fuck about spoilers at this point, but
yeah,
she's supposed to be on a mission to hunt down the royal family and kill them one by one, or bringing them back, whichever one is easier. Mm-hmm. And she finds Medusa, and Medusa swiftly and with due diligence stabs her to death and says, I am the queen of Adelan and fuck you, and that kind of thing.
Was it specifically phrased that way?
No.
Yeah, she says I'm the queen of Adelan, but not fuck you, though. Yeah.
It's like there's so many weird moments in this show, like that assassin lady, she's trying to track Medusa onto a bus that's been, parked and empty.
A tour bus, a Hawaiian
bus. Yeah. Bus. The bus driver's like, "Hey, you can't come on here," and then she just breaks his neck. Like it's very base action movie bad guy stuff that she does.
Only to get killed seconds later.
Only to get killed seconds later, which I don't know. There was a talking wall that teleports people.
Oh yeah, there was that too. It's like that was the counterpoint to Lockjaw.
I guess
Lockjaw the dog can teleport, but there's also this wall who's very sarcastic and doesn't want to do his job. Has to be coerced by way of violence,
killing his family, which I don't even know what that looks like.
Yeah, really. Like he's a stone face. He's literally made of stone, and he's a wall.
And he gets 20 seconds of screen time.
And he's bad CGI, and
fucking horrible CGI.
He looked like Roger Corman's Fantastic Four CGI, actually. That's how bad it was. It looked like that kind of animation. This is just a bad presentation all around.
Yeah, but you should totally see it.
Yes, we actually do recommend it.
You got to see it to believe it. Just not an IMAX.
Simply because this is a Marvel production. They said, okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
They needed a tax dodge.
That's probably what this was in some ways, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's the IMAX thing is weird though. It's almost like it's a parlay on the, Inhumans is not a movie anymore, but hey, we'll let you show the first 2 episodes in IMAX in theaters.
Okay.
Yo, let's do it.
Wouldn't it be great if we hear that the show was canceled before it even airs?
I am waiting for this to be canceled by episode 4. Or not to just not air at all. They're like, you know what? Fuck it. We're done. But excuse me. It did relatively well this past weekend in the IMAX presentation. It made enough money that I think that will propel it through at least its first season.
Even though it still is 0% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah.
Yeah, no one liked it. No critics liked it anyways.
I haven't heard anybody say anything. Even the people that are usually even contrarians are like, yeah, fuck this show.
Well, it'll be interesting to see if Armand White has an article about it.
I'm waiting for him, yeah. Inhumans brave new paths for superheroes while it treads familiar, boring ground about childhood fears.
Inhumans is a movie for the Trump generation.
Ooh.
And that's a good thing.
That's totally a thing he'd fucking say.
All right, so Little Evil.
It was okay. I thought Chips was better.
All right, so Logan, no, tell us about Little Evil.
Nah, you can go on to Logan Lucky. It's okay.
You're kidding me. It was
we are kind of running. We are kind of running on the against time here. So we could probably scrap Twin Peaks: The Return for next week. Actually.
Okay, well we'll do that.
It'll give me more time to think and percolate on it.
So seriously, just really quick, in maybe a sentence or two, what was it about Little Evil that you thought was not good?
Little Evil is a very bland spoof of The Omen from the directors of Tucker and Dale versus Evil. It's got Adam Scott. He is a stepdad, and his stepson is the Antichrist, and Clancy Brown is the leader of the cult, which should be really great, but he's kind of in the movie for maybe less than 10 minutes. There's a couple funny parts, but honestly, off the top of my head, I couldn't even tell you a single one. It's really forgettable, and I was very disappointed. And the last leg of the movie kind of gets into this really sentimental thing where it's like the Antichrist kid doesn't really want to be sacrificed, because it turns out that if he is sacrificed, it brings about the end of the world. So it creates this avenue for a stepfather and stepson bonding story. But it's just really ramshackle and kind of lackluster and not at all memorable, which I thought was really sad, because I love Adam Scott. He's got such a great physical energy to him, especially when it comes to playing the straight man in a comedy. He has incredulity about the way he acts that really kind of bolsters everybody around him, but there was nobody around him to benefit off of that. So this is kind of like this vacuum of comedy where there's a couple funny things, but nothing really comes together in a really interesting way.
Isn't it funny how something as bad as Inhumans is more memorable than something as slightly better made, like Little Evil? Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with the way Little Evil was shot and made. Like it looked fine. It's a Netflix film. It's just shit. Yeah, I mean, I can't think of anything that at all in the film. Like even when I was watching, I was like, that part's kind of funny. I don't really care what's going on right now. But then, as I'm sitting here right now, 5 days or so after seeing it, I don't know what happened. So take that as you will.
All right. Well then, let's get into Logan Lucky.
Chips was better than Little Evil, by the way.
Ooh.
That's not good. So, first of all, I'm the only one here who saw Logan Lucky, correct?
Yes, so, and I'm ashamed to admit that, because I really like Steven Soderbergh.
Well, I've seen it twice in theaters now. I liked it so much. Logan Lucky is a heist comedy by Steven Soderbergh, and it's sort of interesting in that it's, for all intents and purposes, it's his comeback film after an announced retirement. And my understanding of it is he received the script from a screenwriter named Rebecca Blunt, who may or may not actually exist, because no one actually has been able to confirm that she's a real person. She might just be Steven Soderbergh. Some people think that.
Probably.
Anyway,
Soderbergh, one of those directors, is known for creating pseudonyms, kind of like the Coen brothers have. The Coen brothers share. They edit most of their movies, but they edit the movie under one name because the Academy does not accept submissions for editing Oscars under dual roles.
Yeah,
or dual submissions.
Yeah, it's like that, or Neil Young. Whenever he does something on video, the director of his films are Bernard Shaky.
Oh my god, I just found out 9/11 is playing at my local theater. Closer to me. Jesus. Wow. I'm going to actually have to watch this.
So,
sorry about that. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. Logan Lucky is a movie that is very much self-consciously taking on the Ocean's 11 conceit, but injecting it in a completely different location. Whereas Ocean's 11 is about these swanky, high-class criminals who seemingly have infinite means. I mean, I don't really understand their need to necessarily rob, because they clearly can afford a shitload of things. Logan Lucky, on the other hand, is about a group of blue-collar, kind of podunk criminals who came up with a plan to rob the racetrack, and they carry it out. And it's first of all, this movie is just an absolute. It's gleefully edited. Soderbergh definitely put his all into making this movie dynamic and creative. It hits the feels when it needs to. There are some genuinely moving moments in the movie, while at the same time, it's got a lot of really clever humor, some very good visual gags, and particularly, I would say, one person who really kind of shines in this movie is Daniel Craig.
Yeah. I love how the marketing for the film has introduced all the actors, has listed all the actors, then being like, and introducing Daniel Craig.
Exactly. Well, here's the thing: Daniel Craig is not an actor who's gotten much of a chance to do comedy, has he?
No, not at all. I'm hard pressed to think of any comedy he has done besides maybe one or two bit roles here and there.
Right. Yeah. I mean, maybe he's turned up in some sort of a.
He did a little bit of comedy in Star Wars: The Force Awakens, but that wasn't really.
Yeah. Well, he didn't really
a credited role. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I guess he was in the kids' comedy A Kid in King Arthur's Court.
That doesn't count.
Yeah, that was one of his early performances. I'm actually looking at his filmography right now, and
he had a vocal role in Comrade Detective, which we can talk about next week.
Yeah. We already talked about it actually.
Oh, while I was gone.
Yeah. So, at length. There's no need to carry that on.
To be fair, though, the audio was bad, so.
Well, okay, whatever. We'll save it for next week if you want to bring in there. I guess he did do a voice in Adventures of Tintin, and that's sort of a comedy action movie.
His character was not comedic, though.
That's true. And this movie, his character in it is Joe Bang. And Joe Bang is a...
Joe Bang!
Exactly. Well,
and Joe Mama, too.
And the name it describes what he is. He's an explosive expert. And specifically, he's an expert at blowing safes. And what I like about how his character is written is it legitimately feels like in another world, this guy would probably be like a chemistry professor. But instead, he was born on the wrong side of the tracks. And so he uses his education to blow the shit out of things and, drink beer. And anyway.
Okay. He uses his education to drink beer.
To blow the shit out of things so he can afford to drink beer is kind of what I meant.
Oh, okay. I got you.
Yeah. Anyway, anywho, Channing Tatum and Adam Driver are brothers, and they're the Logan brothers. And there's a running gag throughout the film that the Logans are unlucky because they have a history of these. Their family has a history of bad things happening to them. For instance, Adam Driver's character was in Iraq and he had his arm blown off. Channing Tatum's character was crippled in an accident and he has a permanent limp. And then there's other family members within the Logan family that are referenced in dialogue who encountered similarly unfortunate fates. And they came up, and suddenly, out of nowhere, though, almost inexplicably, Tatum's character comes up with this brilliant plan for robbing the Charlotte Motor Speedway and doing it in the middle of an event when money would be pouring in. Without going into too much detail, the film just, it takes you through a nice classic heist scenario, complete with just the right amount of twists that don't overwhelm the story in any way, shape, or form. There's some other good, solid supporting performances from actors like Katie Holmes, actually. Um, let's see who else. Dwight Yoakam, believe it or not, has an appearance in this and is pretty funny. Sebastian Stan. Seth MacFarlane's in this movie, and
that's weird.
I saw that in the trailers. Yeah.
What's interesting is I saw this movie twice, and I can't for the life of me remember what he played.
He had like longer hair or something, I think.
Oh shit!
And a mustache, maybe.
Okay, I get. You know what? Okay, I think I know what he might be.
I'm just pulling one image out of my head from the
Oh
trailer.
shit! Okay, yeah, no, I figured it out. I remember now. Let's put it this way: he didn't annoy me, and that's a change for Seth MacFarlane. Hilary Swank doesn't appear in the movie until like the last quarter, not even quarter, the last literally the last 10 minutes of the movie, which is interesting because the trailers advertise that she's in the movie, and you keep thinking, where is Hilary Swank? And by the time you forgot that she's supposed to be in the movie, there she is. Yeah, I enjoyed it. This is one of Soderbergh's better recent movies, and he's done a lot of good movies. So, see it.
You heard it here first.
I want to.
Something.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and pay to see it in a theater if you can, because this movie is just now starting to break even at the box office, and it needs to make money.
Let's get it over that hump.
Especially since Soderbergh, this movie was kind of funded in a completely independent way. In fact, my understanding is the way he got this film distributed, he kind of chose a completely new way of doing it, and I think it should be supported because it was a way that he was able to make this movie without any studio notes. And it worked very well because he's a director capable of making a commercial, entertaining movie. I'm surprised this movie isn't playing big time in the South because it hits upon all of those aspects of Southern culture, that you would expect to see. Maybe it's just a matter of those in the Deep South aren't a fan of seeing themselves mocked just a little bit and nicely. And it's loving. It's not like he's making.
It's not deserving.
Well,
I think quite frankly, here in the South, we're very deserving of terrible mocking.
Well, here's the thing. He mocks a lot of Southern cultural elements without it feeling like he's
being mean.
Exactly. It does not feel mean-spirited.
Okay.
And I think it's refreshing because sometimes it feels a little over the top in some movies. Anyway, Tyler Perry. So, see Logan Lucky.
I will.
Alrighty.
All right, we got one more movie to talk about, and that's part of the Hawk and Ken movie exchange. Monster.
We should have a little theme music. Hawk and Ken.
Hawk and Ken, they're watching movies and telling people other to watch stuff and things with each other and things.
Telling other people about the movie.
We gotta get Justin Roiland to do a theme song. That, like Ken, as a slight detour at the end of the Rick and Morty episode 2 weeks ago. Like I only caught it on my second viewing of the episode. Is Roiland improvising some really stupid song about terry flaps?
Yes, that was one of the funnier parts of that episode.
Yeah, I totally missed it for some reason the first time. But it's like a very jazz forward R&B song, like very very relaxing. I would listen to a whole album of music like this where he's just talking about my terry flaps and lick my something like lick my flaps, you piece of shit, and then it's like you know how Roiland just gets a little more bizarre the longer he goes on, but there's apparently like a almost 3-minute version of this song, which I'll share with you guys off air. But I love how Roiland improvises. It's just out of control. But in any case, ironically, Roiland is connected to our movie Exchange. My suggestion this week for Ken was Monster House, which was co-written by the co-creator of Rick and Morty, Dan Harmon, who co-created Rick and Morty with Justin Roiland.
Right. Dan Harmon wrote it alongside his longtime friend Rob Schraub, as well as Pamela.
Rob Schraub.
He also has done voices on Rick and Morty. So.
Yes.
Okay.
Just letting you know. And then Pamela Pelter, who
her too.
Yeah. And
what else has she made?
Okay, so Pamela Pelter, she's actually got an interesting bit of credit. She's mostly done television production and things like that. But here, I'll go ahead and read off some of her credits. She was a writer on the animated movie Corpse Bride. She wrote Mary Kate and Ashley in Action, an episode of that. An episode of Saved by the Bell, The New Class. Clueless, the TV series. So she's done a lot of children's stuff. I would not be surprised if, as a writer, she was brought in to turn Dan Harmon's script into something that would be accessible to family audiences. And that's not a knock to her, though, because this movie is actually very cleverly written.
Yeah.
So Rob Schraub, on the other hand, if you're interested in what he's done before, so some of the things he did, he was a writer, producer, and director on the Sarah Silverman program.
Okay.
He was also supposed to mark his directorial debut with the Lego Movie sequel, but he actually was replaced, and apparently there was some controversy behind his being replaced on the film. There was a clear difference in opinion of how that should be made. He actually worked with Dan Harmon on Heat Vision and Jack, so he's been collaborating with Harmon ever since. First of all, do you guys know what Heat Vision and Jack was?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, Heat Vision and Jack was a late '90s TV pilot that is recognized as one of the most, one of the best pilots of all time that never got picked up. It was directed by Ben Stiller, written by Dan Harmon and Rob Schraub, and it starred Owen Wilson and Jack Black. And the plot, listen to this. An astronaut on the run with special powers and his talking motorcycle must deal with a malevolent artificial life form possessing people and turning them into dust, as well as NASA's hitman and real-life actor Ron Silver.
That sounds fucking awesome.
It is. If you've never seen the Heat Vision and Jack pilot, it has leaked onto the internet numerous times. It's quite funny, and it showed so much promise. And the fact that it didn't take off is a goddamn disappointment.
That is too bad.
I feel like I've educated you guys on something amazing. If you want to see something that could have been, you know what? I would actually put Heat Vision and Jack up there with Amazing Pilots, right next to Puchinsky.
Okay.
If you don't know what Puchinsky is, that was a joke because Puchinsky's horrible. Puchinsky was the one where a cop is killed and then becomes a dog that talks, and then they solve crimes. And Peter Boyle was the dog.
Okay. I'll watch it.
Yeah, actually, Puchinsky's worth watching. It's terrible.
Yeah, that sounds like my thing. So.
Try to find Heat Vision and Jack. In fact, I will try to see if I can find a copy of it somewhere. Monster House, though.
Monster House.
Why don't you start us on this?
Monster House is good. It's an animated film about a group of kids in a neighborhood, and the main character, DJ, lives across the street from a house where inhabited by a very angry, cranky old man who will threaten to kill children who come onto his lawn, and any toys that come onto his lawn, he will take them and keep them forever. So right off the bat, this is fucking kind of a dark movie for being rated PG. And it actually was cut down from a PG-13, or I say cut down, but re-edited. Certain things were reworked and added into it to drop it down from a PG-13 to a PG, just because of some pretty heavy subject matter, especially for a children's film. But then there are also, like, I saw this as a kid, or when it first came out. I mean, I don't know how old I was. I wasn't super young, but I was young enough to miss a couple of jokes and references that I caught on my second viewing. So the storyline goes, well, I mean, that is a storyline. There's a possessed house. Because at night, the DJ when he looks across the street, he notices the house moves in a certain way, like the windows crunch up like eyes. And in a couple of instances, he notices that people that walk towards the house, they get near enough to it and get sucked inside of it, and they're never seen again. So essentially, this house is eating people. And DJ enlists his best friend Chowder and a local young girl who he has a crush on to help investigate what's going on at the house and try to defeat whatever evil possesses it. One of my favorite lines in the movie that I never caught until I rewatched it last week was Chowder is talking on the phone with his dad, and his dad kind of just gives it to him and defeats him in this argument. It's like, you got to come home right now. And then at that point, and they hang up. And at that point, the girl walks in, and Chowder pretends he's still on the phone. It's like, oh yeah, Dad. Well, you can kiss my hairy butt. And he turns around and says, "Hey DJ, you got any beer?" And that was a really great line that I don't know why I didn't pick up on that when I first watched it, but that was pretty fucking funny to hear.
It's worth noting this movie was executive produced by Robert Zemeckis and Steven Spielberg, and it has that feel. It has the feeling of being kind of an 80s kids adventure. Especially
Zemeckis, who has that kind of more sinister slant to some of the stuff he makes, especially his animated films like Beowulf.
Well, I mean, some people have argued that Spielberg, even though he was just a producer on Poltergeist, some people have speculated that he might have had more of a hand in actually directing it.
I read a few months ago that was stated as a fact now that he was the director.
Well, that's
it's like it was Tobe Hooper's vision, but Spielberg was the hand behind the camera.
Right. Well, to this day, it's still debated as to who actually should have gotten that credit. And that's and Poltergeist is definitely an example of a more sinister kind of kid's story there.
It makes you wonder, like, just briefly as a detour, what is going to happen with the Han solo film,
the Solo Han project,
the solo standalone solo film. Directed by Phil Lord and Chris Miller, who got booted from the project and replaced by Ron Howard, who is going to get director credit for that film. I don't know.
It depends on how far into it depends on how far into production it is. Sometimes what will happen is you'll see.
They were significant ways into production and filming on Han Solo when they got fired.
Well, I'll give you a perfect example. Joss Whedon is technically taken over directing duties from Zack Snyder for the Justice League movie, but he's not being credited as director.
Well, that's because he's basically just handling the reshoots.
Well, the reshoots and also the entire post-production process.
But
that's different. Credit. That's different from the Han Solo film, where Phil Lord and Chris Miller got fired partly through production. Like, they haven't even wrapped. They weren't even on reshoots and post-production yet. Ron Howard is taking over the final leg of production on the film.
Right. Well, and all of this depends on what the Directors Guild says needs to be credited, and
Right.
they're notoriously fascistic for their choices, to the point where some directors left the guild just because, like Robert Rodriguez, for instance, he left the Directors Guild because they wouldn't allow him to have shared credit with Frank Miller.
Right. That was for Sin City, you said?
Yeah.
Right, because the Directors Guild does not allow directors to be credited together unless they're, quote, an established
Team.
duo.
Yeah.
An established team. And like
That's interesting.
The Coen brothers didn't start getting shared directing credits until like what 20 years into their career.
I mean, yeah, it wasn't until it was after Miller's Crossing. It was before No Country for Old Men.
That's a span of about 15, 16.
Yeah, I know. I'm narrowing it down. I think Barton Fink was just Joel. I can't definitively land on an answer, but I know there was one point.
Reading was the first movie that they shared credits.
Burn After Reading?
Pretty sure.
Let me see. But anyway, while I'm looking for this, we'll keep talking about Monster House. But actually, let's see. I just pulled this up for Han Solo on Variety.com. Who will get credit? Will Ron Howard share directing credit with Lord and Miller? Nobody is really saying anything yet. They're still saying the guild will determine the issue. The DGA's rules also preclude replacing the director with somebody else already employed on the movie. That prevented Disney Lucasfilm from naming Lawrence Kasdan as a new director, despite his extensive experience in the director's chair. Yeah, they're kind of just rambling in this article right now. So, if the DGA fails to reach a decision, the employer shall make the determination, and the decision will be final. The language does not specify when a production company needs to make notification of the directors other than prior to the release of the film. So that probably says that if the DGA can't decide, Kathleen Kennedy and Lucasfilm, Disney, will have to choose one, the other, or both. Knowing Kathleen Kennedy, it's probably going to be Ron Howard. Anyway, Monster House. What do you think, Ken?
I enjoyed it quite a bit.
Yeah?
And that's a wrap. No.
What did you like about
Monster House.
You what?
What I liked about Monster House is that it managed to, well, first of all, that Dan Harmon's humor, which of course is known to be quite vulgar from time to time, that they managed to distill the inherent childlike wonder that exists within his humor, without it having to resort to, directly adult-oriented references. And I think it's a miracle that it managed to do that without taking away the comedy and keeping it still very, very creative and very funny.
Mm.
Oh, by the way, I can confirm that Joel and Ethan Coen actually, apparently their director credits started with The Lady Killers.
Yep, I just saw that too. They got director credits, joint credits on The Lady Killers, and then before that, IMDb lists Ethan as uncredited on their prior films from Intolerable Cruelty and earlier.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, anyway, that's
glad we cleared that up. I like how you and I often arrive at the same conclusions in terms of researching things at the exact same time very often.
Well, it's a matter of Google Foo.
Google Foo, yes. It is strong.
Goofoo.
The animation in Monster House looked dated, but the movie was directed with such style that it really didn't hurt it at all.
What they chose to do visually for Monster House is the film, while the visuals, I would certainly agree, do have a dated aspect to them, they went for a plasticine kind of look to everything. And of course, that's what computer animation does best, is creating a plastic look. But because they stuck to their guns with that, rather than trying too hard to look either too realistic or something along those lines, it's not. You can tell that it's older animation, but it doesn't look bad per se.
Well, and the director Gil Kenan, he films it like the movie's put together with such a cinematic look to it. Like the opening scene is a leaf up in a tree in October, and it breaks off and it falls down. The camera follows it down to the ground as it hits the sidewalk, and then a girl races past on her trike, and it gets lifted up again. The camera whips around and follows behind her, and like there's so much energy to the way the movie looks.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing, in contrast to the flat look of Inhumans. Just to come back and shit on that really quick. This animated film from several years ago just looks fantastic in the how much it has going on. Every scene is so dense. There's so much going on.
Man, all roads lead us back to that, don't they?
That will never get old. That phrase will never get old.
It's so dense. Every single image has so much going on.
It's candor. It's like it's so dense. There's so much going on.
The scene that is most Dan Harmon in the entire film is when they seek assistance from a knowledgeable sage who, as it turns out, is just a douchey, like 30-something dude who is playing in an arcade.
Yeah.
And, because he plays a ton of... what he's playing is basically Altered Beasts, now that I think about it, which is kind of funny.
Yeah.
Because I just got the game. But, he's, because he's kick-ass at Altered Beasts or whatever, that means he's an expert on the supernatural.
Right.
And in the middle of in the middle of giving just this horrible, he's in the middle of a cracking game of, video game. He's spouting this sage-like advice to them, which is kind of funny.
Yeah, and I love how the movie kind of it has enough to get the kids engaged, but there's enough to also like have adults really engage in as well, because there's a lot of intensity that kids might not pick up on, and some of the themes and stuff. But there's also got some of that juvenile humor and the color and the action that will get kids involved. So it's one of those animated films that really appeals to both children and adults. And just as I enjoyed it when I was really young, I enjoy it as I'm older.
One of my favorite lines that is really meant more for adults is when they're talking about grabbing onto the demon possessed house's uvula, and
yes.
the one of the boys says, "Oh, you mean the house is a girl?"
Yeah, Chowder. Like, oh, it's a girl house.
Yeah. Which it turns out that he's right, but of course,
it's stupid, but it's good.
Mm-hmm.
It's also quite frightening as a PG-rated animated film.
The house, they make it look absolutely creepy as hell, and that ending sequence where the house turns into a marauding monster is freaky. And I have to credit, by the way, I have to mad props to the voice cast, particularly Steve Buscemi as the voice of Nevercracker, the crazy old man who lives in the house. Really manages to hit on that, get off my lawn kind of insanity that you get from almost everyone growing up in like a suburban neighborhood knows that there's the house in the neighborhood that you don't go near.
It's a really interesting bookend that we're talking about Monster House at the end of the episode, when we had it at the beginning, when both films really lean into childhood neuroses and fears in different ways, of course, because, well, also in similar ways, because both could kill you. But I don't know. It's interesting that I just realized that the two have cinematic, or I'm sorry. They have nobody can talk today. They have thematic similarities in terms of what children have to deal with, especially with the adults don't really have anything in the way of helping the kids. Kevin James and Nick Cannon play two police officers who don't believe the kids, and they're like, "Oh my God, that house is possessed." And that was actually a pretty funny Kevin James performance in the 5 minutes he was in the film.
You know what? I didn't realize that was Kevin James.
Yeah. So props to him for a good vocal performance.
Yeah, it was a funny scene.
So yeah, I mean, Bill, you have not seen Monster House. Recommend it. It is on Stars, I believe, and wherever else you may be able to find it.
Okay, cool.
It's a very entertaining animated film. It's
other
got
good voice performances in the film include Maggie Gyllenhaal, John Heder, Jason Lee, Kathleen Turner, Catherine O'Hara, Fred Willard. It's got a good cast.
Okay.
Yeah, it's also suitably creepy, very funny, and it looks great.
This is a good Halloween movie.
Yes, it's great going into the season. I'm glad that I was able to rewatch it.
All right, well, we'll go ahead and end the episode there, and we'll see you all next week with some more movieboozer.com. And by the way, I found the Heat Vision and Jack episode. It is on YouTube, so easy to watch.
All right.
All right. Well.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Fuck.